Greetings, I'm Keith Klein, the host of the VentureFizz podcast, where I interview the most fascinating people in the tech scene. This is episode 393, and today's guest is Daniel Demetri, founder and CEO of Trellis. Through the advancements of technology like cloud computing and AI, you no longer need to have a huge team to support a company that is hitting major levels of revenue. And it's not just the ones you read about, like Lovable, Cursor, Wiz, etc., as there are other companies that are able to achieve impressive feats with a relatively lean team. Trellis falls under this category. Conserving cash is an obvious benefit, but as Daniel explains, another advantage is speed. It removes the layers of an organization, which in return, it allows employees to process information and make decisions faster. Trellis is an insurtech startup with a mission to simplify and automate shopping for home and auto insurance by powering intelligent insurance experiences using machine learning, real-time bidding, and conversational AI, backed by a team of nationally licensed insurance advisors. The company is funded by top investors, including QED, General Catalyst, NICA, and Amex Ventures. In this episode of our podcast, we cover lots of great topics, like Daniel's background, including being a webmaster pre-college, and some stories of the inner workings of Harvard, his progression as a product manager at Google, and how he got involved in startups, co-founding a company that disrupted the title insurance industry called DOMA, which eventually went public and is now private, plus how this experience prepped him to be a CEO, what led him down the path of starting Trellis, and how the company is applying modern technology to the traditional model of insurance sales. Lots of details about Trellis in terms of the team structure, hiring plans, and what's next for the company, his thoughts on what makes a great product manager, and so much more. All right, quick side note. Is your company hiring? If the answer is yes, then what are you doing to build up your company's employment brand? If you don't have a content strategy, then it is highly likely that you're just flying under the radar. The good news is that we can help. A subscription to VentureFizz includes a content playbook for sharing all the details on your company, people, and culture. We leverage all formats of storytelling to include video, podcasting, employee profiles, and more. Reach out to info@VentureFizz to get the details. All right, without further ado, here's my interview with Daniel. Daniel, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
I'm excited to talk to you because we're going to talk about Trellis and everything that's been going on with the company, your background story, and some great advice questions. But to kick things off, I think we met, I don't know, it was like a year ago or so, maybe a little bit longer at this point. And one of the things that I thought has been really interesting about how you've been approaching building companies is more like a lean approach versus, needing to hire a massive team and, big go-to-market teams or whatever the case may be. So I thought it'd be useful to just talk about, the current state of building a company. You see the articles out there of companies like Cursor and Lovable, and they have these amazing revenue like ARRs, right? And everyone's just like, wow, this is amazing. And the teams seem relatively small in comparison to what we used to need to do. What advice would you have for entrepreneurs around building a lean and sustainable company?
We have always believed in having a lean team because we've been focused on how does information get processed through an organization. And the fastest way that information gets processed in an organization is in one person's brain. It's so much less efficient for me to communicate information to you than for me to just process it on my head. But you can't process as many things. You can't parallel compute. So you need a team. But we've been trying to draw as if you think about an organization like a computer and you have your level 1 cache, which is right around the processor, you've got the registers, you've got RAM. The farther you have to go, the less efficient it is to compute, the slower you're going to compute. And so we've been thinking about how do we, number one, keep teams small, because the farther you have to go, the slower things go. And then number two is how do we give each of our processors, if you will, as much of a business mandate as we can, so they don't have to go reach across the aisle or across the boundaries in order to get things done. And so we've given all of our teams business objectives and mandates, and they functionally operate, even if a function like data science will have a P&L and will have the autonomy to pursue that business objective in the way they see fit. And that can lead to things like some teams using Vertex AI and other teams using Data Robot off the shelf. And those are two different approaches to solving similar problems, but the domain is different enough and the functional expertise is different enough that it makes sense. And so we've really focused on how do we charter teams? How do we keep them small enough to be, as few layers of management as possible, oftentimes just one group of 8 people with one manager. And how do we give them a business mandate so that they can just get things done on their own and minimize the number of times that they have to work cross team. So that's kind of how we've focused on that. Yeah, for since the beginning, it's you know
All right, so let's talk about, your background story. So from what I've gathered, it looks like you grew up in Brookline, you went to Brookline High School, and then you went to Harvard. But not only did you go to Harvard, but I noticed you were part of the Hasty Pudding Theatricals, which immediately when I thought of that, I was like, wait, isn't that the organization where they have celebrities come at the end of whatever the performance is, and you celebrate these celebrities? I've seen it multiple times. And then you're also part of a dorm Mather house that I'm like, wait, didn't they have dorm competition? So, anyways, I went down this rabbit hole of Harvard and the inner workings of things that you did.
Totally. There were a lot of parts to Harvard. There were the smart parts, and then there's whatever parts I occupied. I was very middle of the road in terms of academic performance, but I played the trumpet going into college and loved doing that. And the Hasty Plain Theatricals at the time, not anymore, at the time was an all-male theater group with a bunch of cross-dressing and just a really silly vibe. And if you ever go see one of their shows, it's just ultra silly and fun. And so yeah, they give out these awards and they throw a whole parade down the street like it's a
Right.
carnival.
That's what I've seen. Yes. Yeah.
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 Which is, right in the middle of like when we're trying to study for finals and stuff. This might explain some of the academic performance. And yeah, so my junior year, we had Ben Stiller was man of the year. He came and visited, and then Scarlett Johansson. And both have gone on to have excellent careers. They already had excellent careers, but they continue
Right.
to have excellent careers. Neither's been canceled. And and it was so fun to host them and get dinner with them as a group. And the show itself was hilarious. And we do a show in Bermuda every year, and that was like a fun trip. Learned how to drive a moped. If you've never been to Bermuda, the roads are extremely narrow, and it's an extremely ill choice for learning to drive a moped because you'll get hit by a bus.
Right.
Literally, I learned to drive a moped and took off and like crashed into a stone wall. It was like my first like they're like because there's no lessons. They're just like here's your scooter. You need to go to the concert.
Yeah.
No wall. I was all right, but anyway,
It's
yeah,
funny.
super had fun there. Yeah,
And what was the Louis Cup?
the Louis Cup. I don't remember the Louis Cup. Oh, is
Okay.
like an intramural,
That
like
was
an
the Mather
intra-house?
versus Kirkland thing
It
that,
sounds familiar. The truth is,
okay.
Mather House is one of the farthest dorms, and so we ended up being quite insular. Kirkland was all popular with the jocks because it was close to the athletic center, so all like the cool kids would go to Kirkland House, and like Mather House was like people who never left the dorm because it's so far away.
Well,
Yeah.
like, because I was like, all right, what famous alumni graduated from Mather? Which I'm sure there's lots of them,
Oh, what was the
but
answer?
no, well, so that's when I
Well,
all of a
as
sudden
you can
discovered this
tell from
Louis.
my, mirror appearance, Conan O'Brien went to Brookline High School, and
Yep,
then he went to Harvard.
yep.
And he did a bunch of comedy stuff there, like the Hasty Pudding theatricals. Not, I don't think he did that, but he did other like Lampoon. And he was in Mather House too. So he and I are basically the exact same, as you can tell from our appearance as well as everything else. Maybe I'm a little
I was,
funnier, but he's probably better at finance.
all right. So when did you start getting involved? Like, 'cause you were a webmaster like early on. Like, how did you get involved with that?
I've always been like when I was 3 years old, my parents put a Mac in the house and I just started to play with it. Um, Math Blaster, great game. Number Cruncher, excellent. Um, Eventually, I wanted to learn how to make games, and that was what led my parents to get me a book on C that was this thick. I taught myself how to program with the intention of making computer games. Discovering how hard it was to make computer games, I just made little convenient apps. And then discovering how expensive video games were, I decided I needed to make money somehow, and that was the webmastering business. So my parents found me someone willing to pay me $9 an hour to make websites, and I stayed doing that for through college. Eventually increased my price from more than $9. I think I got up to 12. And so I've always loved computers, have always loved what they could do, discovered the business impact that they could have on organizations of all kinds. And that's always been sort of my uh, skill set. I've also always been fascinated in finance. And those were two different things that you really didn't want to mix in the 90s. They were things you didn't want to mix in the 2000s, even. If you mixed finance with technology, you were in IT, and you were in IT at a bank. And
Right.
IT was in
Yes.
a bank was not an awesome place to be. You wanted to be the trader, you wanted to be the analyst, you want to be front of the house, investment banker or something like that. So that was always what I pursued as a career. But then I was always like interested and excited about AI was one of my favorite classes in college. Machine learning, one of my favorite classes in college. And so those were my fascinations, but I always thought they weren't going to be a great career. And then you flash forward to the 2010s, fintech and now insurtech have been excellent places to build a career and quite happen to be at the intersection of the two things I've always been interested in. So that's kind of the story of how that all came to be.
Very cool. Well, how did you get your career started?
I with the webmastering was my first job. After that, I worked at in a private equity fund doing real estate for a year and realized I wanted to be somewhere a little faster paced and somewhere that we were building new innovative ideas. Private equity has been historically much more focused on just how do we take existing businesses and render them a little bit more efficient, or preserve their value over time, or into a better market. So I've been captivated by how do we change the game for the benefit of consumers, right? How do we really change the lives of people and have an impact? And so ultimately that led me back to Google, which at the time was an extremely innovative company at the level of product as well as the level of HR and how do they hire, how do they build teams, how do they empower people. And that was an excellent experience learning the tech sector from the vantage point of being at a Google in 2011. And then on the way out of Google, I was exploring how do I get back into being good at finance and having finance play a role in what I do, because I like thinking about that kind of a problem. And I think for a lot of people have concerns about money, and I would want to endeavor to help them with that. You know, a lot of those concerns are not totally necessary or come from ill planning, solvable problems. Um, and so that was an exciting opportunity for me. And, flash forward to now where we're solving hundreds of people's, thousands of people's financial problems every day. And we're doing that with the benefit of technology making those solutions possible. We could never do it without the technology. And so getting to see these 5-star reviews on Trustpilot that people leave us and hearing when we have customers every day crying on the phone because they're so blessed by what we did for them and they're so thrilled with it and the impact on their lives is so meaningful. And so that kind of an impact at the individual level is something that really motivates my team and me. That was something also that I learned at Google, where at Google, I was ultimately responsible for part of Google Maps, and I shaved milliseconds off of people's search times. And in aggregate, you take the billions of users and you throw some milliseconds of savings, and you actually saved lives, right? So our team saved lives of people's time, but no one cared. None of the users who benefited, we're a rounding error to everyone. And that's kind of where I learned you can't really integrate impact at the level of personal satisfaction. If you have this curve and you can't, it's harder to feel good. It's a lot better, easier to feel good about saving 3 actual people's lives than the sum total of billions of people's milliseconds. And so at our company, We touch a smaller number of people than Google does, but the impact we have on them is memorable to them and something that they're willing to fight for or spend time on thanking us for on online review sites or on the phone or whatever. And for me, that's more, and for our team, I think that's more easier to appreciate.
Now, at Google, like, how did you get into product management? Because that's not always a career path that you don't graduate with a product management degree. So how did you land in that?
I had a friend doing it, and he told me this is what you should do because you're at the intersection in your career of being fascinated in finance and economics and business generally. Um, all these books that I was reading on value investing and how to manage a business. And I always thought of myself as pre-MBA. I never ended up getting an MBA. Um, but I was a business and finance guy who had a computer science degree and a set of interests in that area. The application of technology to business has been where I've always been. So I knew I kind of didn't want to be an engineer, and nor was I really smart enough to be an engineer. Still not, by the way. I'd probably not get hired here. Um, but um, but so I was never going to be an engineer. But I was able to talk to engineers. That was what I really learned in college, working around a lot of others smarter than I, um, computer science majors. Was how do you talk to these people, and what are the domain? What's the domain language of computer science, and how? What are the important terms as they're in their applicability to business? Anyway, I applied to Google and I got rejected. And I thanked my friend for the application, for the help. And then, a year and a half later, after being in finance, I reapplied. Same friend referred me. It's the same job. And that time I got back to the final round interviews like I had the first time. And the same interviewer, Marissa Mayer, asked me the same question,
Oh, you
which
interviewed with
was,
Marissa.
yeah,
Wow.
the first time too. She rejected me. And then the second time she was like, "Hey, I already asked you this question. Can you give me a better answer this time?" And
What was the question?
the question was,
The
"What
manhole
are you most
cover
proud
one?
of having accomplished over the past 4 years?" And the first time I had said, "Well, I played a significant role in the Harvard Investment Association," and she flagged me as too interested in finance. And and the second time around, I had been working on a little app called LunchLink, and it was a little side project that I'd been working on to connect people in New York City. Back in the day, everyone went to an office, and you'd be in this big office building with all these other companies. My building, I was in 345 Park Avenue, which is now in the news because of the shooting. But at the time, you have the NFL, you've got the banks, you've got hedge funds, and you're all in the same building together, and there's very little opportunity to meet people. And so I built this app to help people meet each other for lunch, when they were so proximal. And so anyway, that was more up the consumer alley that Marissa was paving at Google. And I guess she let me in that time. But product management's
Much
very
better
hard to get
answer.
into. And I actually have a whole interview that I did on a pretty popular product management course now. Cole Mercer put together like a Coursera or something like that, on product management. So you can look out for Daniel Demetri Product Management School or whatever, and you'll find me there.
Okay, I didn't know you were the guru practitioner of educating how product management should be done. Like, I run a VentureFizz product management community. We're gonna have to have
Oh, you
you
got
as
to
a
check it
guest
out.
speaker.
It's a pretty good
Yeah.
interview. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, but from there, so you went to Earnest, which fintech, but like you're talking about Trellis and how you're helping people. Like that company, same idea. Like student debt is like
Crushing.
it's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So to help people figure that out and maybe climb
Yep.
out of it.
We
So
didn't
what did
even
you work on
start.
there?
I mean, at Earnest, it wasn't even it was personal loans in the beginning. It was people who
Okay.
like needed, this is their kind of their last line before payday. And our belief there was some people, if you look at their story, if you really look at, and if you logged into their bank accounts, you would see some people are responsible and are in a hard time, and other people still need to learn responsibility. And that there's a difference, and those two people could have the same FICO score. So our thought at the beginning was, can we find people who have an exogenous factor and are being put in a tough spot versus are themselves putting themselves in a difficult spot. Um, and that was what we worked on. We ended up applying that to student loans, and we saved a lot of people a lot of money. ultimately originated billions of dollars of loans. I was the first product manager there. Um, they didn't have a product function, but I told them, guys, I want to think about fintech all day, every day. I'll take a pay cut. You got to hire me, and they got excited about me, and they made a job for me. Um, I tell a lot of people when they're doing their career searches that a lot of people think of themselves in the functional sense. I'm a product manager. I need to find a product management job. But I think that people are better fit, and then they do a broad search of like, well, what are all the product manager jobs that are open? But I think it's actually better to be narrower with your search and to say, what are the problems that I'm like just so jazzed up about doing? And then to try to go find those companies that are solving that class of problem and create an opportunity there because they'll make one for you. Not everyone will, but 1 out of 20, if you're jazzed about that particular thing and you know everything about the space and you're the perfect fit, it's better to be an opportunistic hire than just try to fill an open role. And it's going to be a better fit for you too. So that's what I recommend to people is to actually narrow their search instead of to broaden it and to think of themselves in terms of the problems they're excited about more than about the functions that they're capable of executing.
Great advice, because I completely agree. Like people, especially in this market, if they're just spraying their resume to every product management job, they're going to be one of 1,000 applies, and it's just never. But if you narrow it down and you have that conviction, like if I wanted a product management job and I was excited about insurtech and what Trellis was working on, I would be 100% focused on getting time on your calendar, because I'm going to reach out to you on LinkedIn and like, this is why you need to hire me. This is why I'm passionate. This is what I did. And this is why I'm a fit. And some people just like, they're just like, the market's terrible. And, it is. I'm not debating that, but there are ways that you can overcome it. And it's got to have that focus and conviction. So,
Totally. Yep.
okay. So the next chapter, like you co-founded a company.
Well, yeah, I was a technical co-founder. Yeah. Um, I joined this guy Max who had a series. Well, he had a founding pitch deck and he had $10 million, which was a good combo. And we took on title insurance. We took on this really old industry that has not really changed its workflows in a long time. And we had the objective of ultimately saving people money on buying a house and owning a house. Um, Ultimately, the company's done a great job at accomplishing that and has kicked off programs with companies like Fannie Mae. Um, During the SPAC frenzy, the company got kind of became part of that and IPO'd at very high, SPAC-y kind of valuation. Um, Eventually, the stock kind of came down to earth, but it was really an exciting opportunity for me to start from scratch for the first time and own engineering for the first time, not just product like I did at Earnest, and to build something from nothing and to do product discovery at the same time as sales. That's what founders are doing, is they're selling and learning at the same time. And once you get to an established organization, you have salespeople who are really selling and doing very little discovery, and you got product people who are doing some amount of discovery, not very much selling. But founders in early stage are kind of doing sales at product at the same conversation. And so that was really, how do you sit down with a loan processor and ask, what's your workflow in a way that doesn't make them look at you like you know nothing, I'm never going to work with you. When you know nothing and they shouldn't want to work with you. So that's really the challenge of a founder, is that discovery and that sales at the same moment with the same person, the same conversation. And that applied, substantially to what we've been doing as well. So yes, so we grew the team, just millions of dollars, had a lot of success with DOMA. It's now called DOMA. It used to be called States Title. And it was a great founding experience, yeah. And it gave me finally the confidence and the skill set that I could be a founder CEO.
Yeah. I mean, obviously the company went public through a SPAC, but it still exists today. Like it's still a publicly
Totally.
traded entity today. Yeah. So,
It's actually
uh,
private. It got taken private
okay.
very recently. So now it's back to private equity. Yeah.
So what did you learn from that experience?
The skills get around how do you build a product from scratch while selling it at the same time? How do you manage the scarce resources of a startup? because I was on the executive leadership team and at the board meetings and really behind all those closed doors, like what do those conversations really look like? How do you do planning? How do you do finances? And how do you manage operations and partnerships? I ended up, because the company was doing so much corporate development activity, managing a lot of the day-to-day across a lot of functions. So I got that exposure, all these, how do you run an operations team, partnerships, business development, and I also got more confident in the boardroom about how should a good boardroom work and how do you pitch investors and stuff like that. And one more thing I learned, it was the most important thing from a business perspective, is you need to go after a big market because the entire title industry is only about $30 billion a year. That includes escrow fees. And the problem we kept running into was I can go hire, excellent million, $2 million a year engineers out of Google, but we need to get ROI. And it's hard to get ROI when the market's so small. If you make a 0.1% improvement to oil and gas, and you're a gazillionaire. And of course, you go hire those engineers to make that 0.1% improvement in oil and gas. But you make a 1.1% improvement to title, and it doesn't pay for itself. And so that was where I was like, my next venture needs to be something big so that even if we have as a startup that small market share and a small, a reasonable impact, we can still deliver the absolute dollars required to pay for expensive talent. So that was a really important lesson out of the title world.
Trellis. So what led you down the path of starting another company?
I was consulting in and around the car insurance world and discovered that traditional insurers had very low conversion rates from quote to sale on their websites. And in particular, like 4%, which means 96% of people who spent 15 minutes to get the quote were burning their time and getting nothing of value. And it seemed very wasteful. And so the thought was, and then what I later discovered is that the reason that these insurance companies are paying so much money to get people to get quotes is because they're really using it as lead gen for their call centers. And so actually, only 4% of people buy it online, but then another 4% of people end up getting a phone call and they'll pick up and it's from Liberty and they'll buy the policy and then they end up buying it that way. And so the question was 75% of Americans are shopping online for car insurance, but less than 20% are actually buying it online. And so very little digital penetration of the point of sale. What is happening on these phone calls that's so effective? And how do we translate that into the digital experience so we can eliminate the cost? Our thinking was no one's talking to an insurance agent because it's fun. They're talking to an insurance agent because they feel like they have to. So why is it that they feel like they have to spend that 40 minutes and all that time on the phone? And so how do we translate that to digital so they don't feel like they have to? And we spent a lot of time, years, millions, investing into a digital experience for buying insurance. And ultimately, I would say that we failed. We're not able to move the revenue, if you will. We weren't able to get people to really buy insurance much more dramatically on web. But what we did discover is all the reasons that people do buy it on the phone. And while we didn't solve the problem that you need a high bandwidth communication to go through a very nonlinear, very path dependent exercise of finding the right insurance policy and getting it set up. But at the same time that we were discovering this is why we can't get off the phone, we happened to see ChatGPT and these conversational technologies emerging that have enabled us to flip the script. So we flipped the entire mission 180. Instead of saying move the revenue, go to the efficiency of web, we're now saying take the efficiency of digital, bring it to the already effective phone. And so now we're trying to sell insurance on the phone, but using automation, conversational automation. And so that's really how we 180'd from move the revenue to now just core out the costs, meet the revenue where it already is. And that's always an easier problem to solve, by the way. If you can find revenue and then hollow out costs, that's a much more proven, lower risk approach than moving revenue or creating revenue where it doesn't exist already. So what our mission is right now is using machine learning and generative AI to generate a higher quality, but also probably even more importantly, a lower cost of delivery for the experience that already makes people happy. Already people are choosing it with their wallets.
Wow. Okay. I didn't realize that that's what you were doing now. So I'm glad
Yep.
we're catching up. So
Yeah.
if let me like repeat it back. So you realized the online channel probably good for lead gen, but it wasn't closing the actual insurance sale.
Correct.
So consumers feel more comfortable having that phone call, and that's just their nature. So you're
Yes.
bringing your platform. So is it an automated system?
Not only customers more comfortable, the insurance companies as well. Because the insurance companies have a million questions that they need to ask you before they give you insurance. And it's faster to get all those questions done and a little easier to get those questions done on the phone where you can hear intonation, where someone can ask for clarification. Some of these questions are super confusing, right? So how do you, what's a channel where a customer can ask for clarification of a question, where an agent can provide a few examples of answers that would be relevant, where inference can be made from, I'm this kind of profession. I can assume you're not a PhD probably, right? So how can we use information you've already provided that makes your time better spent? How do we, so, okay, someone's told us they, are uninsured today. Well, the insurance companies that um, ask about whether you're insured or not, they don't care about your education level. So we can skip that question. So it's a very dynamic workflow, and it's one that is very high bandwidth um, in terms of like the exchange of intonation, the exchange of how impatient is this person getting? Should I go for the faster option that's like slightly less, um, or slightly more expensive? Or is this person willing to hang out and answer more questions to get a better price? And those things can be accomplished on the phone. So we deliver people a better ROI on their time and on the phone than we can on the web, where you have less information about the person on the web. Yeah.
So this um, agent, so because you're still doing a phone call with a person, but your technology is powering that agent to be more
We have a virtual agent as well. So
as a virtual agent too.
yeah, we
Okay.
call about 100,000 people a day. And um, that those 100,000 people, maybe 10% of them pick up. But if they do pick up, they're talking to a virtual agent initially. And that virtual agent is qualifying their interest in talking to a human agent. And then they can
So
talk to
once
one
you
of our human agents.
and the human agent, is it Trellis that's powering that to then
Yes.
give you
Yeah,
your
Trellis has
options
a
of
bunch of W-2 licensed agents. Our agents are all nationally licensed. Our agents are equipped to sell auto, home, motorcycle, whatever the person needs. And they deliver ultra best in class service. I mean, the reviews are impeccable.
and they're looking out for your best interest so they can recommend, hey, based on what you're, because that's the thing with insurance, everybody, it's personalized based on everyone's unique
Yes.
situation.
And
And there's
those
so many,
agents have amazing, not only technology that makes sure the calls that are coming into the agents are good for both the customer and for the agent, but also technology empowers the agents. What I call a local agent at scale is the model that we're working at. Like, a local agent is going to know in this part of North Carolina, National General is a better fit than Progressive, or for this kind of profile, Chubb's not going to look at them. So that's the local agent knowledge. But we want the at scale benefits of open 7 days a week. No, if you call a local agent, they might be out on vacation for a week. They might be unresponsive because they're busy that day. And so there's benefits to being at scale. And so we want the best of both. And the technology has enabled our national contact center of agents to operate with that local wisdom and expertise. So the machine learning is saying, Jack's coming in with this zip code and these types of vehicles and getting quotes from insurers and ranking those quotes for the agent so that the agent can say, given your profile, this is the best fit for you. Let me ask you a few questions. If you don't have the patience for those few questions, we'll go to this other option. It's going to be faster, but maybe a less good price. And so that's how the agents are navigating the system, delivering local expertise, but with the benefits of being at scale. Our average wait time is like a minute. To get on the phone with an agent, it's very fast.
it makes, so the business model is obviously when you sell a policy, there's the rev share with the insurance company that they give you a commission or something.
Yes. Yes. Um, we typically average like 11% is what we get paid by insurance. Not a lot. It's very thin margin business, and that's why a lot of the traditional incumbents, a lot of the traditional local agents are going out of business or turning down their business. Very few people are starting new local insurance agencies. And as a result, there's a lot of customers who are looking for service and can't get a hold of an agent. And so there's quite a lot of shoppers that we're able to meet. Um, we have to deliver tremendous efficiency in order to make the economics work. And we do.
Well, you highlighted earlier in our conversation, like, this is something that does affect people in terms of their finances.
Yes,
Like insurances only go up. Home, auto, health, like
totally.
it's all just like it just keeps going up and up and up and up. Whether it's warranted or not, or if there's any claims, it's just like it
Totally.
just keeps going up.
Yes,
So
by a lot and more than
by a
inflation.
lot,
Yeah,
like by a lot, and you
yeah,
have limited options. Like you need the insurance because if you don't, you're really putting yourself at risk. So if you can provide that service where it's the consumer feels good about their choices and they're saving money, then obviously there's tremendous, consumer satisfaction.
totally. Yeah. Well, our customers are saving $800 a year. A lot of our customers are probably making about median national income, maybe even less than median. And so $800 a year is a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
We've had like people saying this is the difference between being able to put Christmas presents under the tree for her grandkids and not being able to. Or people, we have a lot, our average customer is like 50 years old. So we have a lot of senior citizens on fixed incomes, and this is a particularly challenging time for those individuals, and our solutions are really amazing for them. Especially because if you're 50, you probably haven't had to shop for insurance in a long time, and now you're running into this crazy insurance market, and you need the help to navigate it.
Yeah. No, so the agent is, you just explained, how many agents you have, but the operation itself, it goes back to my first question of, it's a very lean operation as it relates to, development, data
Yes,
scientists, products. So talk about how the rest of the organization is structured.
totally. Within technical functions, we've got a few essential teams. One is our conversation engineering team. That's the team that is actually talking to customers over text and voice and interoperating with everything else we do. Another team that we have is the real-time bidding team, which is in charge of the machine learning that powers our pricing of our marketing spends and sort of allocates our marketing spend. We spend about $100 million a year right now on marketing. Yeah. So one team of 4 engineers is in charge of all of that spend, basically. So, okay, per engineer, they're spending $25 million. That's a high impact job. And so they are, and growing, right? We're hoping to spend $200 million in the next 12 to 18 months. So, like, significant growth. Now every engineer is spending $50 million a year, right? So the impact, even 1% improvements to all the algorithms has massive, pays for the salaries. So we're really excited about growing all that team in particular. Um, and then we've got the core engineering team, which is in charge of the intelligence around how do we help someone find the best, what is the best policy for someone? What's the right insurance company for them? Which agent should they speak to? Is now a good time to reach this person or not the best time? Should we try again after work? So all the intelligence around the orchestration and the ranking of someone's actual insurance needs, that's the core engineering team. So those are and then we also have our data team, which powers, you can imagine our data warehouse is pretty massive. We're calling 100,000 people a day. We're uh, seeing even more of those people online. We are uh, just dealing with a huge amount of volume of data about each shopper. Every interaction is getting logged, and we're sort of trying to make the best use of every millisecond of the customer's time. So every moment of their journey, every text message they get, every text message they send us, every click on our website, we're thinking about how can we paint the pixels to be slightly better? How can we use language that's slightly better? How can we pick up the phone with slightly better language, intonation, voice quality? And we're studying all of these things. And so our data team has been responsible for ensuring we have ultra high quality data and then using that data to drive impact. And so that's another team we've been investing really heavily into. Um, so those are the technical functions that we've got and how the sausage is made.
Like, so you did raise funding, I think 17 million
I
total,
think we're
according
total
to
23.
23.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, which is really not that much compared to some of our competitors. We have competitors who've raised 100, 150 million, and I think they are bigger than we are in terms of revenue, but I think from a like return on equity perspective, I'm very confident we're in the leading position. And from a sort of EBITDA or gross profit multiple basis, I think we've done an excellent job. We're a profitable company now, generating our own capital.
So looking ahead, what do you envision, you know, the future for Trellis is going to look like?
Yeah, so the machine learning just is going to get better, and we've already started to see the scale advantages of, growing from $10 million of revenue at the beginning of last year to now over $100 million a year of revenue. And we're seeing, so with that kind of growth, what we used to learn about consumer behavior in a quarter, we can learn about in a week now. And so we can try out marketing sources, try out language, try out all these recommendations for insurance, and then learn from it. And then the next week it's much better. So the machine learning and tightening the feedback loop and just improving that, bringing more sophisticated techniques, that's a key piece, a pillar of our growth. Another thing that we're doing is bringing personalized, what I would say dynamically generated content to every moment of the experience. And so that's instead of having the traditional experience is templated marketing, right? You just get bombarded with these kind of impersonal, hey, Dan, first name, comma, you could save X dollars on your X policy. What we want is feed all the context about the shopper into the context protocol and then dynamically generate content. So replacing everything template, my team's charters, replace everything templated with dynamically generated content so that we can fit with the precision of a local agent, right? We're not really delivering, a local agent doesn't typically use, the best agents at least don't use templated messages. They're using their fingers to think about, okay, if you're this age with this kind of vehicles and these kids, this is the kind of things that you're going to care about and how I'm going to approach you. And we need to do the same thing, but at scale and with the efficiency of automation. And then the other thing we're doing is orchestration. Uh, Today, it's okay, we got the lead and then we're hitting them at lunch and at dinner. But how can we um, talk to the customer about, hey, when's a good time? If someone says, call me after work, we should call them after work. Maybe we should also, if they're at work, we should say, well, if you're at work, you might want an online shopping insurance option in the meantime, just to check it out. Let us know what you think of it. And we can dialogue with people. So really it's, investing into the conversations and then also investing into the intelligence, the insurance intelligence, so that we can have recommendations to give to people that are limited to that channel, limited to that moment in time, that meet people. If someone says, I need full coverage, the system needs to be able to limit to full coverage. So those are the kinds of things that we're investing into in terms of personalizing the experience and making it more bi-directional and conversational in nature, agentic essentially. If you think about one day, we're all going to have like a phone that you just talk to and say, this is what I want, or this is what I need. Like we're building that, but just for insurance. It's going to meet your insurance needs.
All right, I want to go back to your experience as a product manager and leader of great product people. So what makes a great product manager?
It depends. It depends on the problem they're trying to solve. A great product is one that ultimately serves an audience really well and does so effectively and efficiently. So typically what we're finding, especially in fintech, especially consumer fintech, you need to be pretty good with numbers. Then that's a very different story from being good at usually engagement-driven apps, where you may not need to be as good. Maybe you're doing something more experiential. Like if you're in charge of Figma, you might be able to analyze some numbers here and there, but you might also just need a better sense of the domain of design work. So it depends on sort of what you're trying to solve. But in consumer fintech, It's a financial product, so you need to be able to jump into the user's minds. You need to be able to sort of have empathy, user empathy, and say, what is that person going through? What are their problems? And what are they familiar with? Right? If they're not familiar with the lingo you're using in your UI, for example, then they're not going to be able to use it. So, so it's called user empathy. I think it's just really deep understanding of users, of your target users, and then analytical skill set. And you also need to be able to understand what's technically feasible. This is where if it's easier to build it, that matters a lot. And what's easier to build is not generic. Sometimes it's easier to build this thing here because our architecture supports it and extends to that versus, oh, our architecture doesn't really support that. We'd have to refactor everything and start from scratch. So that's where the technical skills tend to come in play in product, is understanding what's possible, or what is the cost, and being able to act as a little bit of a buffer for the engineering team so they don't have to keep going back to you and say, well, that's expensive, or if that's the only idea, I guess we could do it. It's going to take a month, when there's a 80% of the value could have been done in 20% of the time type of thing. So users, tech, analysis, so you know that you actually did the right thing, and can find those nuggets of, you know, the right things by analyzing, well, who should have converted and didn't? Or where does our conversion funnel look like it's broken because we're converting very little here? So those are the main skill sets.
All right, 3 apps you can't live without. Can't be Slack, email, or calendar.
um, if it can't be Slack, email, or calendar, so not communication tools. Well, we use a ton of Google Sheets, and we also use a bunch of Data Robot, and Data Robot's a machine learning platform. And we also use a ton of Looker, which lately has been more frustrating than it used to be. It's kind of devolved, but we do use a lot of Looker, and it standardizes our semantics throughout our business intelligence, which has been nice.
How about a podcast or book recommendation for entrepreneurs?
How Leaders Lead with David Novak has been pretty good. In terms of books, Innovator's Dilemma is hard to beat. Clayton Christensen. I think a lot of people misuse the term disruption. You have to read the book, because like if you just Google for what is disruption, people are using it today to mean just like, oh, it's just innovation. It's 100% not that, or it's 80% not that. It's a much more specific type of innovation, and so I think more people need to understand what disruption really is, and not all great innovations are disruptive, and that's okay. They can be very valuable and not disruptive. Um, Arguably, our solution is quite disruptive, because we're taking on a lot of calls that traditional agents don't want. And so it's kind of like, well, I don't want that down market customer. That's a very canonical type of disruption. Um, Disruption does not mean I instantly am everyone's worst enemy. That's what a lot of people kind of use disruption as, like, I'm instantly terrifying the incumbents. That's not usually what disruption is. Disruption usually is the incumbents laugh at me because they say I don't want that business anyway. Um, so that, that's real disruption. So that's a book more people.
What do you like to do for fun outside of work?
I fly planes.
You do?
I'm a commercially licensed pilot, actually, and I've gotten into aerobatic flying, so loops,
That's
rolls,
terrifying.
hammerheads, absolutely,
What?
yeah. The G forces are some of the harder part of it. While you're trying to perform an advanced aerial maneuver, and getting and touching the borderline of blacking out is a very thin. That's a line that needs to be very carefully drawn. Um, yeah,
That's interesting.
yeah. I've never really thought of myself as a risk taker, but now I've started a startup and gotten into aerobatics, and like I guess, like, on paper I am a risk taker or a risk manager. Even I
I would
never
say
thought
you
of myself that
qualify.
way. Yeah,
I
I'm
would
not
say you
a thrill
qualify.
seeker typically. What's fascinating about aerobatics is not the thrill of it. I mean, it's thrilling, but it's just more about um, the focus required. That's what's always been fun about flying is you can't be distracted about that thing that happened at work or that, thing that's going on with your family or whatever. Like you're just 100%, what's my vector to the next destination? What's my altitude? Where's my emergency landing strip? How are the RPMs on my engine or am I lean of peak 50 degree? Like you just can't not be 100% focused on the task at hand and everything is sort of in a way it's very meditative. It just completely drains all the regular things out. And aerobatics is especially so, right? You have to be focused. Am I flying that circle the right way or am I not? Um, yeah,
I think
highly
you
recommend it.
are, well, I think you're also probably well trained because of all those hours you spent on the flight simulator game when you were a kid.
I never did the flight simulator game. If I
No?
had, I probably would have gotten it all out of my system, but I didn't
I
get
used
to
to love
do
that.
it. And so exactly. So that now I'm doing it. I'm with interest on it. Yeah, to recruit all that interest.
Well, Daniel, thanks so much for taking the time to walk us through your background story. Obviously, all the great work you and the team at Trellis are up to, and obviously, all the great advice.
Thanks. Yeah, it was a pleasure. See you later.